Đây là tòa nhà ông Trump. Đi xuống dưới đây mình mà bước xuống bến tàu này mình mua vé. Chicago River Walk là đi bộ dọc theo dòng sông ở đây, thành phố Chicago. For ticket. $57 đi ban ngày 90 phút. Còn buổi tối là $73 đi 90 phút. Chicago First Lady. Cái tên tàu của mình là First Lady hả? Hỏi có phải tên tàu mình là First Lady không vậy? Đây lại thấy tòa nhà ông Trump nữa, cao quá từ xa là thấy liền. Nếu không đi tàu thì người ta đi bộ dọc bờ sông để tham quan cũng được, nhưng mà ở đây nó không giống ở San Antonio. Ở bên Texas nó có hai bên để đi bộ, bên đây chỉ có một bên thôi. Bên kia đi bộ. Kêu mẹ lên đi, ta đang lên hết rồi. Đi lên dưới chỗ. Người ta đi bộ ở đây. Người ta xếp hàng lên hết rồi. Gọi điện cho mẹ đi. Đất trong bịch truy, người ta lên lầu, người ta lên ôm thoát hết rồi. Hello. Enter here. Open it. No more shit. Okay. Watch your step, folks.
Oh, there's still some on the bed.
Hello.
Can you bend your back?
We're checking out here. Muốn ở đây không?
Yeah.
Okay. Rồi. Có đây không? Hay là kêu ngoại với mẹ xuống không? Dưới mũi tàu. Cho mẹ coi coi mẹ muốn không? Mẹ muốn xuống không?
Mẹ nói no.
Đâu hả? Mẹ ngồi trên hả?
No, mẹ nói mẹ không muốn mình ngồi đây.
Không muốn mình ngồi đây hả?
Mẹ dưới chỗ rồi đó.
Đây đi lên.
Mẹ dưới đây.
Đúng ra.
We all got cell phones, but we please ask you turn them to silent or vibrate. And if you do need to make a phone call or take one, or you wish to have extended conversation with those around you or your friends, please step into the salon where it'll be less disruptive to your neighbors as well as the dosage during the ride, and that would be appreciated. You may, of course, so, with no further delay, I will let Chris take over because he's a much better speaker than I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Blake. So everybody can hear me back there, right? Good. All right, thumbs up. So welcome aboard. It's a beautiful day. We got a nice weather. We're 20 degrees warmer, not as much snow as my first cruise of the year last weekend, so we're already ahead. But I'm going to tell you something for those of you from out of town, people that live or grew up in the Chicago area, always remember the weather forecast that says cooler near the lake. So it will get a bit. I do have my jacket out here. I'm going to try not to put it on. So welcome. We have people from all over the world. I heard Mexico, Italy, Argentina, France. I think we got a World Cup match ready to go. Congratulations to Argentina. It was a great match. Sorry. It's an important location. It is what's called Pioneer Port, and it is where the first non-native permanent settler arrived and settled here in Chicago. His name was Jean-Baptiste Pontoussaint. He was of African and French descent. In 1921, architects are Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White. As the name indicates, it was the headquarters of the Wrigley Chewing Gum Company. Again, a neoclassical building, but it is looking, instead of ancient Greece and Rome, it is influenced by Spanish Renaissance architecture. In fact, the clock tower itself is inspired by the La Giralda Tower.
Tàu bắt đầu hành trình đi tham quan thành phố Chicago.
What was at the time a state-of-the-art skyscraper. Steel skeleton construction, elevators, electric lights. So a modern look on a modern interior, but a very looking to the past and the exterior. Now on our right, immediately on our right, we see the 2017 Apple Michigan Avenue store. With 4 columns on the interior, that roof. The roof itself is made of carbon fiber. Very space-age material that you're more likely to see on a modern airline. So we're heading underneath the Michigan Avenue Bridge now. We'll go under about 24 or 25 bridges today. But just as we peek out from under the bridge, look on your left, and you'll see a building with, across the top, there'll be, on the top, there's a large, looks like a temple up there. That's called a Belvedere. And then just below that Belvedere, you see a row of columns. That's called a colonnade. Definitely a neoclassical building. It looks like maybe an ancient Greek or Roman temple. This is the London House, Chicago, completed in 1925. Alfred Alschuler was the architect. Notice
Đây là tòa nhà của Trump đây.
entranceway flanking on either side. You see that winged lion logo?
Của cựu tổng thống Trump.
It was a guarantee and action company. It was a company that provided maritime insurance, so provided insurance for the boating and trade industry. Why would they need a company from London to insure boats here in Chicago in the middle of the continent? Well, this river, London House, the glass and steel, and you can see at the top there, just above the London House, there's some people standing up there. There is a rooftop bar with great views of the river and the city, especially at sunset when it gets dark. So this process where we take a building that was built for initial purpose as an office building and now has been
London
renovated
House.
into a hotel. We call this adaptive reuse, where a building has kind of outlived its original purpose financially, but with historic preservation and some ingenuity with architecture and engineering, they can reconfigure it into give it a new life. Another building on the left with those belvederes, one at each corner, and then a tall one in the tower in the middle is the 35 East Wacker. We'll see it as we peek out from under the bridge. And I'm mostly going to be talking about buildings on the left right now. So you'll notice that I've probably gone by some important buildings on the right. You say, hey Chris, you missed some, but we're going to come back this way and I'll talk more about those as we come down the river again. But this,
Hai tòa nhà này không biết cao bao nhiêu tầng mà hết 15 tầng để xe không. Nhìn ở tầng dưới, mấy tầng dưới có chỗ để xe không.
Terracotta exterior, it's clad in terracotta, but again is a steel frame building. Closer to us, here along the river, I call this one of our newest parks here in Chicago. This is the Riverwalk, and as the weather gets warmer, and some of the shops, bars, and restaurants begin to open, it'll get even busier.
Đây là 15 tầng để xe và 41 tầng nhà ở. Đây, nhìn ghê không?
Primary architect was Ross Hardy Architects here in Chicago, working with the landscape architecture firm Sasaki out of Boston. But they converted this area along
Họ
the
đưa
river
cái
into
đuôi
the
xe
river.
ra
And then notice under the
trên đó là
bridges,
để ở,
we have these
41
walkways
tầng để
that
ở,
stick up.
tòa tháp đôi này.
So those weren't there before the Riverwalk was developed. So these walkways
Kiến trúc cũng
underneath
đặc
the
biệt.
bridges connect all the sections of the Riverwalk. It actually took an act of Congress to get that approved because this is a federally managed waterway. The captain hinted earlier how we are under the auspices of the U.S. Coast Guard, and we have to follow their regulations. Again, the federal government had to approve that. Now, on the left, just beyond the bridge, you see a building looking right up into the sun with the, looks like a triangle at the top. If you're familiar with the Parthenon in Athens, Greece, by Ricardo Bofill, 77 West Wacker. Ricardo Bofill, a Spanish architect, and this style is considered postmodern. I haven't talked about modernism yet, but modernism was the style prevalent in the mid part of the last century, 1950, 1980, which was very plain glass and steel boxes. Postmodernism was a reaction to modernism. They said, give us something more interesting to look at. Give us references to older styles of architecture. So you see the arches over the windows. So kind of giving us a hint of past styles of architecture, classical style. So that's a postmodern building. So we have neoclassical, postmodern. After neoclassical style is a style prevalent called Art Deco. We got a good example of that here on our left. This building with the American flag over the entrance. It kind of has a shape that looks like a chair or a throne. This is the LaSalle Wacker building, completed in 1930. Halliburton and Root were the architects. It is an Art Deco building. Art Deco was a style popular in the 1920s, 1930s. Think of after World War II, or I'm sorry, World War I. It was very positive. The economy was booming, so there was very much an emphasis on the vertical. Buildings were getting taller and taller. Notice those sections between the windows, those darker sections, how they're recessed, the horizontal. But the vertical lines are unbroken, taking your eye all the way to the top. So that's how they emphasize the vertical in an Art Deco building. We'll see several more examples of that along the way. Now the bridges we're going under, each one of them, they do open. Not infrequently, they mostly open now in the spring and in the fall when people take their pleasure boats or sailboats from storage along the river out to the marinas on the lake. But they are called a trunnion bascule bridge. And there's French trunnion, meaning like an axle. The bridge will pivot. I'm pointing at my elbow as I lift my arm here. That's the trunnion, and the bascule is like a teeter-totter. The leaves of the bridge, when they lift up, they are carefully balanced with very heavy weights that are underground. And it takes very little energy to raise or lower the bridge. Chicago has more movable bridges than any other city in the world outside of Amsterdam. But this trunnion bascule bridge, while not original in Chicago, we certainly have one of probably the most examples of that type of bridge in any city in the world. And you'll notice some of the bridges actually do also carry our elevated tracks, the trains. If you don't see it, you'll definitely hear it. The Wells Street Bridge we just went under carries them. Fortunately, we weren't interrupted. Now on our left, this building with the American flag sticking out just above the entrance, 225 West Wacker, completed in 1992. It also is a postmodern building. It has those two needles up at the top that are pointing to the sky. It's, instead of referencing classic architecture, it's actually referencing the environment around it, referencing structures. Those two towers where the needles pointing out are said to resemble the towers in each of our bridges. And then you can see connecting those towers is a bridge. So the architect, Cone Patterson Fox, is aware, letting us know that the building is aware of the built environment around it, paying tribute to the bridges and the bridge houses that line the Chicago River where it's located. So a really good example of what we call contextualism. Now we're heading towards the confluence of the river, where we've been on the main stem here, off of Lake Michigan, and the river will split into north and south sections. We're going to head to the right, up to the north branch, and we'll head down the south branch a little later. But I want you to take a look at another building here on the left, following the curvature of the river. This is 333 West Wacker, completed in 1983. Cone Patterson Fox out of New York City, again, we're the architects. notice its contextualism with the river, with the natural environment. We have the curvature of the building reflecting the curvature of the river here at this location, and then even the colors of the windows. The alternating bands of green windows really are reflective of the natural color of the river. If you were here over St. Patrick's Day weekend, the green would be quite a bit different, more of a neon green, but you get the idea. So another example of contextualism in a postmodern building. And also, of course, all along the way, we see the river walk. So straight ahead, a building with arches. There's one arch at the bottom coming down to the ground, and if you can look up and avoid the sun up there, there's another corresponding arch at the top. This is River Point, completed in 2017. Picard Chilton are the architects. And then there is a sculpture in the front, that red sculpture. It's called Constellation. It was, the artist was Santiago Calatrava. He's actually a famous architect, artist, and engineer. Pretty busy guy. But this is one of the newest public artworks in the city of Chicago. The building, though, is built in a unique location, at least for buildings. You typically think that they just connect to the ground. They don't have to worry about any obstructions. But below this building and along the south branch of the river are railroad tracks. And you can see these openings, these circular openings. You can see some fans there, indicate that there are active railroad tracks there below the building. So they had to build the building over the footprint of the railroad tracks and also provide ventilation, because those are diesel locomotives. You want to provide fresh air into that tunnel there below the building. So unique situation here along the south branch. We're going to see more examples of that. We'll actually see the trains later on. But now on our left up ahead of us, there's this pink or salmon brick building. It's the oldest building on our tour today, completed in 1898. The architect was Frank Abbott. It's called the Fulton House. And when it was originally built, it was intended to be a cold storage warehouse. So it was really a giant refrigerator freezer. Because all the trains here, it was a convenient location to store goods before they get shipped out of the city. But by 1970, it kind of had outgrown that purpose, and the architect Harry Weiss came up with the idea to convert it into condos or apartments. So they actually had to thaw the building out. It took 18 months to prepare it, about 6 months to thaw out the building, and then they had to remove the insulating material, mostly cork and horsehair. About 80 semi-truck trailers full of cork and horsehair, and then they punched out the windows and the balconies. And if you look at the balconies, you can see how thick the walls are to provide that insulation. So again, going back to that adaptive reuse concept, the building, we're able to preserve it historically and give it a new lease on life. Harry Weiss also designed these next set of buildings, these ones with the slanted roof on the left, triangular shapes. Harry Weiss was a avid sailor, so he took some
Có
inspiration
quá
from
nhiều
the
nhà cao
sailboats
tầng
and,
và còn đang xây dựng thêm
other
những nhà cao tầng khác.
hobby to design these 4 condominiums. I think Easter weekend, I think party. But any excuse, right? Okay. So those 4 townhouses, when they were built here in the 1980s, they were, it was considered kind of crazy to build along the river. The river was very polluted, it was smelly, it was dirty, it wasn't a welcoming place that you'd want to live along. But thanks to many efforts from the city, state, and federal government, cleanup of the river made it much more welcoming. And now those condominiums, I think even Michael Jordan may have been a member at one time. So with their high-end clientele, they didn't want their people looking out, their clients looking out at this dirty river. So these walls were mostly blank. It wasn't until a later addition and modernization of the building beyond the past. I may pause for a minute sometimes underneath these louder bridges. Listen to talk over. But we're now heading in the north branch of the river, and ahead of us, on the right-hand side is sea. So with all these residents moving into the area, we see all these condominiums that have been built here, most of them since 1990. This park here, Montgomery Ward Park, an amenity added to give the residents a place to walk their dogs. You typically see people walking their dog along here. So a lot of them enjoying it, and the geeks as well. Montgomery Ward was an innovator in the retail and catalog business, but but he also has a legacy here in Chicago as a person who preserved Chicago's public spaces. Buildings is here on our right, this Art Deco style building, One River Place. It was originally a Montgomery Ward warehouse and an office building, but you can see it's since been converted to condominiums. Notice the balconies added on, but also just above our eye level there, you see the ornamentation. If you look closely there at those ornamentation, there's actually a butterfly in there. And then those vertical lines taking you up to the roof line with even more ornamentation. So another example of Art Deco. Huge building with the bands of brick along its length. This is the 600 West building, as it's now known. It was originally built as a warehouse, a catalog warehouse for Montgomery Ward. It was one of the largest buildings in the world. It was the largest reinforced concrete building in the world when it was completed in 1990s. You can see the one corner, it has a tower that's a bit taller, and then there's a statue up there. It's called the Spirit of Progress in New York City that was destroyed on September 11th. This building built right after the World Trade Center. Printing press for the Chicago Tribune. In fact, they print most local editions of the local papers and national papers such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Of course, the newspaper business has undergone a lot of transformation. Hardly anybody reads physical papers anymore. They're doing it mostly online. So the Tribune knew that it was going to probably sell this land and put it to another use. Just to our west, well, 10 miles off to our west, to the right, is a little-known geographical feature. It's a subcontinental divide. Now, many of you from out of town may think, well, it's pretty flat here, isn't it? This is a pretty flat area. How can you have a Illinois River, which connects to the Mississippi River, and then down to New Orleans, the Gulf of Mexico? So, from here in Chicago, the early settlers, the Native Americans, and then some of the early explorers that came from French Canada, they knew that if you could connect that divide, just cross that divide with a canal, you could make this. So they knew they had to come up with a big idea, think outside the box, as they say today. And that idea was to reverse the flow of the river, to build a new canal, a canal that was wider and deeper than the existing one, and especially, most importantly, deeper than the river itself and Lake Michigan. So the island was actually removed during the construction of the Panama Canal 10 years later. In fact, many of the techniques and the people that were used for the building of the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, as it was officially known, worked on the Panama Canal. So by 1900, the city is nearly, the sanitary district is nearly done with completing the canal, but the people in St. Louis get word of this canal, and Chicago is now going to send all its pollution their way. So they don't like that, right? They file a case that goes to the Supreme Court to try the sanitary districts that they said the great volume of water coming out of Lake Michigan and going down through the rivers, by the time that pollution reached St. Louis, it would be clean. In other words, the solution to pollution. But I think it's going to stay that way. Fortunately now, we treat our waste before it enters the river. So Chicago has one of the largest wastewater treatment systems in the world. They treat over 1 billion gallons of water a day before it can enter the river. The only problem is there's periods of heavy rains. It really wasn't considered buildable, but Getz Partners, along with the structural engineering partners of Magnus and Clements at Seattle, came up with this idea to have this super strong concrete core that would go down in between the railroad tracks with modern technology.
Tòa nhà này nhỏ ở dưới và nó chĩa ra giống chữ V và nó mọc tuốt cao lên trên, giống như chỉ có một cột giữa thôi.
This is one of the newer buildings, included in 2020, the Bank of America building, also by the same architects as the previous
Đây
building.
những cái cột chống bên hông tòa nhà, rồi nó cao tuốt lên trên. Tòa nhà cao tầng vậy mà chỉ chống bằng mấy cột ở dưới này. Ngoài kiến trúc ra thì cái kỹ thuật xây dựng thật là độc đáo.
The height of the building and then the horizontal lines that are set back. But the Civic Opera building, it was built to house Chicago Civic Opera, and the developer of the building had at it from above, it would look like the letter S. Bertrand Goldberg said there are no straight lines or right angles in nature. So he used nature, such as trees and leaves, as the inspiration for his designs. Okay, I talked about the cow that started the Great Fire, to each other. And then as the building gets taller, some of the tubes end. The 50th floor, the 66th floor, and then the 90th floor. So that by the time you get to the top of the building, there are only 2 tubes remaining. Why use these tubes? 1990 was very bright, but because we know a lot more about nature and our building's interaction with nature, it was determined that the lights were so bright, it was disturbing the migration patterns of birds. So you can see the map, the wide section showing the Chicago River flowing by, and then it goes up to the top where it splits into the main branch and then the north branch. And then in the middle there, that orange or red rectangle indicating you are here. That is where the building is located on the map. So I guess the idea was, if you can't put your building on the map, put a map on your building. I pointed this building out. I like if they're ever going to come back. I remember I saw them there, and then I went on vacation, and then 2 weeks later they were gone. But I'm actually talking about the building next to it, to its right. You'll notice it has a white steel frame at the top of the building. Why is that exposed steel work there? Well, these buildings on the left are built over the railroad tracks. They use what are called air rights. The owners of the railroad actually got permission from the Illinois Supreme Court. They said you can sell or lease the space above your railroad tracks to private developers. So the innovations that took place both legally and, which is mostly to your right, to expand westward to the left, to your left.
Đường ray xe lửa nằm dưới cái building.
There where that white frame is, we'll see a little better if you come up in front of the bridge here.
Trên cầu này là xe lửa chạy.
And then the logo, this is the Boeing building, completed in 1990, Perkins and Will. But this shorter tower that's closest to us, the corner of the building that's closest to the Intelsat building, the railroad tracks actually curved there. And again, that building that looks like, that flares out, and from here we can see the profile. It looks like a tulip or a
Đây mình quay trở lại cái tòa nhà mà giống như có một cái cột ở giữa. Nó lên được vài tầng, nó chia thành chữ V và nó xây lên các tầng cao lên trên.
It's over 50 stories tall. When they were designing the building, they determined that the force of the wind up at that height would cause the building to sway quite a bit. So they needed a way.
Chữ V cuối nó chịu lực cho cả tòa nhà building luôn.
Reduce the sway because you don't want your tenants getting seasick while they're working. So they stop. And when the wind pushes against the building and causes it to sway, the water will slosh. That's the engineering term, slosh. And it will cause the building to stay closer to its vertical. The architects, it is the local headquarters, or will be, for Salesforce. And it is a LEED certified gold building. So what is LEED certified? LEED, L-E-E-D, and the spire head pointing up to the top. It was completed in 1989 by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill. It is considered a postmodern building, but it really is a tribute to Art Deco. So many people call it Deco Echo. But there are those flying buttresses up at just above halfway up. They look like arms kind of pointed out, supporting the building. They are actually paying tribute to the flying buttresses that are in the Chicago Tribune Tower, which we just passed. So it is the blue and aqua-colored glass on the exterior, and it's got a unique shape, each of these towers. Notice how they kind of get wider and narrower and wider again. This is the St. Regis Chicago. It was completed in 2020. The architect is Jeannie Gang. She's an Illinois native, one of the really star architects of today. And she's
building này nó
but this is her
lượng sống
building here in Chicago.
rất là khó thi công.
It's unique because of the
trên
shape.
các tầng cao như vậy.
We get a very good look now. Each floor is either several inches narrower or wider than the floor above it and below. So it's the St. Regis, so there will be a St. Regis hotel opening on the lower floors. The upper floors are condominiums that are now largely occupied. But this center section here that we're passing now, you can see it kind of reflects the shape of the building, that undulation. That shape, they look like maybe even popcorn boxes that are stacked on top of each other. Those are where the 3 restaurants in the hotel. The north side of the city on your left, to the south side. So it was a pretty big event for President Roosevelt to come out here. And he gave a famous speech, but he mostly talked about the world political situation. So this building will forever be the only one built on this side of Michigan Avenue. It is a residential building, like I said, completed in 1968. It is modernist, though the shape is...
Step outside.
Actually, I think those are my open windows right there. the 2, like the middle, yeah, those are my open windows.
The lake, but we got a break today, no wind, so that's really fortunate that we were able to enjoy the warm weather out here. So as we turn around, I talked about the St. Regis. We can see those the 3 towers, the tallest one sticking out there. But notice the tallest tower. The traffic would, the foot traffic and the bicycles would normally have to go on the bridge very close to the car traffic so they're able to build truck buildings that we never before would have thought of. And also it's an era of green buildings. They are more built with an idea of sustainability in mind. So we're heading to the dock now, so I want to remind everybody to stay seated and remain seated until the captain or a member of the crew gives us the okay to go ahead and disembark. We want to make sure nobody gets knocked over as we come up towards the dock. So just like an airplane. No seatbelts or tree tables to worry about here. So I want to just take this opportunity to thank the captain